To learn about the retroperitoneal space, we have to review the following things: parietal peritoneum, mesentery, visceral peritoneum, and the peritoneal cavity. So first, the parietal peritoneum in blue is the mesothelium lining the wall of the abdominal cavity. Mesentery is this double membrane of peritoneum that then comes and surrounds each organ we call visceral peritoneum. And then the peritoneal cavity is the fluid-filled space within this peritoneal lining. And we look at this, those are all the structures of the peritoneum. And we ask the question, where is the retroperitoneal space? Well, this word retro means behind, and peritoneal, of course, means peritoneum. And so there in blue is the peritoneum, and in purple is the space behind the peritoneum in the abdominal wall. That's the retroperitoneal space, which contains retroperitoneal organs, and all those organs are sad pucker. Hold that thought. And so organs are considered retroperitoneal if they have peritoneum on their anterior side only. Shing, like that. Organs are considered retroperitoneal if they are not suspended by mesentery. There's the mesentery, no mesentery. Organs are considered retroperitoneal if they lie between the parietal peritoneum and abdominal wall. Those are the characteristics that consider if an organ's retroperitoneal or not. And then what organs does the retroperitoneal space contain? Sad pucker. So this video tutorial is going to be covering the retroperitoneal space, and we'll answer the questions: what is meant by sad pucker? What are the muscles of the retroperitoneal space? And what is the lumbar plexus? Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Morton, and I am the noted anatomist. All right, so retroperitoneal space consists of the organs sad pucker, which is an acronym for suprarenal glands, aorta, duodenum, pancreas, ureters, colon, kidneys, esophagus, rectum, duodenum, kildum. All right, so we're going to focus on the suprarenal glands, aorta, inferior vena cava, because the other organs have been covered in other tutorials, but we cover them because they're contained within this space. So first, there's our suprarenal glands. And the suprarenal glands are also known as the adrenal glands, because supra means above, renal kidneys, the glands superior to the renals, or adrenals, which are the glands on the renals. So they both are synonymous. And so there we're going to blow up a step dissection of this adrenal gland and see that the adrenal gland consists of two things: cortex and medulla. So the adrenal cortex on the outside is there. It's derived from the intermediate mesoderm in embryological development. And there we have our pituitary gland. The pituitary gland produces a hormone called ACTH, and ACTH stands for adrenocorticotropic hormone. And the ACTH, when secreted in the bloodstream, targets the adrenal cortex, hence the name adrenocortico, and it then influences 3 layers of cells in this adrenal cortex we see blown up. And so the adrenal cortex, because there's so many hormones, is very rich in vascular supply, because the adrenal gland is an endocrine gland which secretes their hormones into the blood supply. And so one of those layers in the adrenal cortex is called the zona glomerulosa. And the zona glomerulosa is going to secrete mineralocorticoids like aldosterone that helps regulate blood pressure. We also have this zona fasciculata, which secretes glucocorticoids such as cortisol. And then finally, the deepest is the zona reticularis, and they're going to secrete androgens like DHEA. Okay, then in the middle we have the adrenal medulla, which is derived from neural crest cells. And this because the adrenal medulla really are just unmodified, or modified, I guess you can put that way, post-ganglionic sympathetic neuronal cell bodies. They're going to secrete epinephrine or adrenaline. That's what they do. That's where the adrenal gland gets its name. It secretes adrenaline, or you could say where adrenaline gets its name. So the adrenal medulla, if we take a look at again that little section here, and we see the adrenal medulla, they're going to then secrete adrenaline, which is also known as epinephrine. Epi means upon, nephros, kidney. or noradrenaline, which is also norepinephrine. And these are going to be secreted into the bloodstream. And so here we've got, so the adrenal medulla does not have a postganglionic neuron because we'll see the adrenal medulla is a postganglionic neuron. So there we've got the T12 level of the spinal cord, and a preganglionic sympathetic neuron courses out the ventral root, ventral ramus, into the lesser splanchnic nerve, and it courses through the aorticorenal ganglion without synapse, and it goes right to the adrenal medulla. And then in the adrenal medulla, those cells are going to be modified postganglionic cells and postganglionic sympathetic neuron cells, and then what they're going to do is secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine directly into the bloodstream. And then the bloodstream carries norepinephrine and epinephrine to the heart, and then the heart pumps these hormones into the systemic circulation. Okay, so the next in the sad pucker is the aorta and inferior vena cava. And there we've got two pictures, of one on the left of the aorta and on the right showing, or my left, your right? I never get that right. In red, there's the aorta. In blue, there's the inferior vena cava. And so where is the inferior vena cava and aorta in relation to the peritoneum? Some quick review. In there, we've got all the peritoneum. And behind it, we have the aorta and the inferior vena cava. And what happens then is the mesentery is those two layers, and it takes all the arteries, veins, lymphatics, and autonomic nerves in the two layers of the mesentery from the retroperitoneal space to all the different organs. So in the aorta, we see that green line that shows right down the midline, and we see that the aorta is just to the left of the midline. That's its anatomical topography. And the aorta consists of unpaired branches and paired branches. So let's talk about the unpaired branches first. The first of which is the celiac trunk that we've covered, which supplies all the foregut. The second is the superior mesenteric artery, or SMA, which supplies the midgut organs. And then there's the inferior mesenteric artery, or IMA, that supplies hindgut organs. For more information on each of those, there's tutorials on these three different arteries. Now, there are paired branches that come bilaterally off the aorta. The most superior of the paired branches is called the inferior phrenic because it's on the bottom, inferior surface of the diaphragm, phrenic, and it supplies the diaphragm. We have the renal arteries, gets their names because they supply the kidneys, hence the name renal. And we have the gonadal arteries that get their names because they supply the gonads. In the female, they'll stop in the pelvic cavity. In the male, they'll go through the deep inguinal ring, inguinal canal, and into the scrotal sac. We have the lumbar arteries that are homologous to the segmental supply of the homologous to the intercostal arteries, and they segmentally supply the lower back and lower body wall. And then we have our common iliac arteries, which is the bifurcation of the aorta down at the bottom near the ala of the sacrum. And common means it's going to branch. So the common iliac arteries are going to branch into an external iliac artery, which after going through the inguinal ring will become the femoral artery. And then the internal iliac arteries, which supply the pelvis and perineum. All right, now the IVC, or inferior vena cava, and its branches. And so there we've got the IVC, and there's the midline, and the inferior vena cava is just to the right of the midline in anatomical position. And there we've got one of the first branches is called the inferior phrenic vein, which supplies the bottom inferior surface of the diaphragm, phrenic, or I should say drains it. Then there we have the hepatic veins. The hepatic veins drain the liver. They collect all blood that's supplied to the liver. And so think of those hepatic sinusoids, and the blood percolates through the three zones of hepatocytes and the terminal hepatic venules. Terminal hepatic venules will drain into these hepatic veins. Then we have our renal veins. They're going to drain blood from the kidney. And we see right there that left renal vein courses underneath the superior mesenteric artery. Then we have our right gonadal vein that drains the right gonad, testes in the case of a male, ovary in the case of a female. Now take a look at this left gonadal vein. The left gonadal vein is unique in the sense that if we follow this gonadal vein down, what it does is the left gonadal vein drains into the left renal vein and then into the inferior vena cava. So the left gonadal vein does not drain directly into the IVC. And then our lumbar veins are segmental veins draining the body wall in the lumbar region. But there's also these ascending lumbar veins that become contiguous often with the azygous system of veins. Many ways of getting collateral blood supply back to the heart. And then our common iliac veins drain into the IVC, and they collect blood from the external iliac and internal iliac veins. All right. So in sad pucker, let's take a look at duodenum next. And in the duodenum, the first part is intraperitoneal, but the second, third, and then the fourth part, which tugs underneath that jejunum, are all considered retroperitoneal spaces. And so we blow this up a little bit. In front of the duodenum, we can see the root of the mesentery. That's going to see, and between those lines, you see the SMA and SMV. And then we also see here is this transverse mesocolon. So you can see this part of the duodenum is behind both the root of the mesentery and transverse mesocolon, meaning they're retroperitoneal. Next, we've got the pancreas, the head, neck, and body. There's the pancreas. So the head, neck, and body are all retroperitoneal, but the tail, the very tip of the tail that touches the spleen, that is considered intraperitoneal. All right, next we've got the ureters, and I'm going to put the kidneys together since they all go together. So there we've got the kidneys, and the right kidney slightly lower than the left because of the liver in the way, and the kidneys filter urine. More on that from in other tutorials. And then the ureters are these tubular organs that are going to drain urine from the kidneys down behind and into the bladder found in the pelvic cavity. All retroperitoneal. Next, we've got our colon, the ascending and descending colon. So in blue outlined, that's the parietal peritoneum outlining on either side of where the ascending colon would be located. And then there again, in parietal peritoneum, the reflections showing where the descending colon would be. So if we take now a cross section through the abdominal wall, as viewed from foot to head like a radiograph, there we have the ascending colon. And on front of the ascending colon, blue is parietal peritoneum. Now watch. These two areas where the parietal peritoneum is covering and going to be surrounding the ascending colon, look at that's where it's located. It's retroperitoneal because parietal peritoneum is only on one surface. And then we've also got the descending colon, and there's parietal peritoneum covering it, and these two reflections here and here represent where the parietal peritoneum covers the front of that descending colon. I do want to make a note on this. So even though embryologically the ascending and descending colon are considered retroperitoneal organs, the reality is that is such a thin membrane. It's as if they are intraperitoneal. They move in the whole bit. So surgically, the ascending and descending colon really function like they're intraperitoneal organs. All right. Next, we've got our esophagus, and the esophagus comes in through that esophageal hiatus in the diaphragm, and it is retroperitoneal and then very quickly becomes intraperitoneal when it enters the cardia of the stomach. And then finally, the rectum. And so this picture that you see here does not show it. So let's add this sagittal section through the pelvis of a female. And then in blue, there's our parietal peritoneum, and then there's where the sigmoid colon goes into the rectum, and notice the rectum is behind the parietal peritoneum without any mesentery between parietal peritoneum and, in this case, the pelvic wall. You'll also see the uterus and the bladder, which are considered infraperitoneal organs because they're below the parietal peritoneum. All right, so let's now talk about muscles of the retroperitoneal space. Let's start first with the diaphragm. The diaphragm muscle is innervated by the phrenic nerve, and we've talked quite a bit about that in the respiratory lecture or tutorial. But there are three openings in the diaphragm that go to and from the abdomen. The first is the aortic hiatus at the T12 level of the vertebral column, where the aorta traverses. Then we also have the esophageal hiatus, where the esophagus enters first retroperitoneally and then becoming intraperitoneally, becoming the stomach. And then the caval hiatus at the T8 vertebral level, where the inferior vena cava pierces the diaphragm and almost immediately goes into the right atrium of the heart. There's our diaphragm. It's what separates abdominal and thoracic cavities. Next is our psoas major muscle that arises from the L1 to L5 vertebrae and then inserts on the lesser trochanter of the femur. This is a big hip flexor and vertebral flexor. Next is our iliacus or iliacus muscle that arises from the iliac fossa and also goes down to the lesser trochanter of the femur. This is a big hip flexor. So together, the iliopsoas musculature, we have the iliacus and the psoas major, and they cross below green, that inguinal ligament, into the lesser trochanter. Below the inguinal ligament, we consider the iliacus and psoas major the same muscle, the iliopsoas. All right, now quadratus lumborum gets its name because it has four sides. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Quadratus for 4. Lumborum because it has attachments along the transverse processes of the lumbar vertebrae. And this is a good stabilizer of the vertebral column. All right, so now that we've done those muscles, let's talk about the retroperitoneal space and nerves. And so the lumbar plexus of nerves. So there's a cross section in the yellow arrow of a thoracic spinal cord level, and then there's the ventral root, and then there's the ventral ramus from T1. And then there it becomes, the ventral ramus becomes an intercostal nerve. From here all the way down to T12, those are intercostal nerves, extensions of the ventral rami. But what happens in the lumbar region is that these ventral rami form a very complex plexus of nerves that go to the body wall and to the lower limb. And so there's our lumbar plexus, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. So let's take that and blow it up. And here we have all the different branches of the lumbar plexus coming off. So first, we have our subcostal nerve. Sub, because sub means below, costal rib. And the T12 nerve innervates the body wall muscles and supplies the T12 dermatome. Then the L1 ventral ramus divides into the iliohypogastric and ilioinguinal nerves. I'll show you pictures of that in a minute. Then we've got the genitofemoral nerve that branches off of L1 and L2. We have our lateral femoral cutaneous nerve that comes from L2 and L3 ventral rami. We have our femoral nerve that comes from L2, L3, and L4 ventral rami. And then we have our obturator nerve, which also comes from L2, L3, and L4 ventral ramus. And then the connection to the sacral plexus is called the lumbosacral trunk from L4 and L5. Why don't we do that again, except now in the context of how you'll see it in the cadaver. First of all, so the lumbar plexus in situ. So there we go. First, there's our rib number 12. So there's the nerve below that, the subcostal nerve. And so this is going to innervate the abdominal wall muscles, external oblique, internal oblique, transverse abdominis, rectus abdominis. And then it's also going to supply which dermatome? The T12 dermatome from there to there on each side. Okay? Next, we have our iliohypogastric nerve. And so there's our L1 vertebrae. And so there's the nerve coming below the L1 vertebrae. And the iliohypogastric nerve innervates the body wall muscles, as well as it contributes to that part of the L1 dermatome. Not the entire dermatome, but that part. Then we have and there's our iliohypogastric, showing it where it is cutaneous field. Then we've also got our ilioinguinal nerve. Okay, there's the L1 level, and then there's our ilioinguinal nerve. And the ilioinguinal nerve is going to course down through the inguinal canal, and it's going to supply that part of the L1 dermatome, as shown right there in pink. Okay, ilioinguinal nerve. Next, we have our genitofemoral nerve. And so there's L1, and there's the L2 vertebrae, and black is showing the contributions from both the L1 and L2 ventral rami to form the genitofemoral nerve right there. And the genitofemoral nerve is shown there in that gray area of the cutaneous distribution, and it also innervates muscles of the body wall. There's our lateral femoral cutaneous nerve from L2 and L3. There's one contribution, and there's another contribution from those ventral rami, and it courses below the the inguinal ligament, and it's going to supply the lateral surface of the thigh. I'm sorry that the picture, the nerves are showing the right, and then my cutaneous fields is showing the left thigh. Sorry about that. But that left femoral cutaneous nerve, all the lateral side of the thigh. All right, now the femoral nerve. So the femoral nerve has contributions from L2, 3, and 4. And so there's the contribution from the L2 ventral ramus, L3 ventral ramus, and L4 ventral ramus. And they come together, they go below or deep to the inguinal ligament, and they're going to then supply sensory to the whole front of the thigh and also the medial part of the shin of your tibia via the saphenous nerve. And it does motor to all the quadriceps muscles, your quadratus femoris muscles, which are responsible for extending the knee or straightening your knee. All right, we now have our obturator nerve that arises from L2 and L3 and L4 ventral rami. So there's our 3 contributions from those ventral rami. It goes through the obturator foramen and enters the medial part of the thigh. So for sensory, it supplies that yellow area, just a little bit of skin in the medial part of the thigh. And motor, it supplies all the adductors, so the medial compartment thigh muscles that are responsible for adducting the hip or bringing your knees together. So there is our retroperitoneal space, and here is our retroperitoneal space in a nutshell. All the organs found in the retroperitoneal space are sad pucker. The muscles that line the posterior or the retroperitoneal space are the diaphragm, psoas major, iliacus, and quadratus lumborum. And the nerves found within this retroperitoneal space are all the branches of the lumbar plexus of nerves. Thank you so much, everyone. And there's the retroperitoneal space in a nutshell.